Good morning. How's everybody? Thanks a lot for coming to our community forum. This weekend is the 46th anniversary of our State of the Race, what we call SOR. And we've had, a number of events. And we have other events occurring this weekend. Well, we just really want to thank you for coming out. This is an absolutely incredible event. Just one little factoid I'd like to let you know is that Miss Reid has been and is the first African-American woman to have a primetime news program. And Reverend Sheffield is going to give you a ton of information, so I'm not going to cut into that. But again, on the back of your program, there's a QR code. We'd like for you to examine it, sign up for it, because we have a host of events, and I know you've been wondering, why didn't I hear about that? So you can get on our list, and you'll be able to get events. So thank you so much, and enjoy your Easter weekend.
All right, do we have our events uploaded? Let's go through those real quick. Of course, Joe and Reid today, right? This is tonight at the Music Hall. It's how we raise our funds. Bruce, Chrisette, Michelle, and Kindred Family Soul. There's still some tickets available. Please support us. Keith Ellison, he was my intern in high school and now Attorney General, about to announce to run for the governor of the state of Minnesota. A supporter of my daughter will be here campaigning for her May 6th and 7th. All right. Mason in the morning, you come get a $25 gift card, get your blood pressure checked, get all kinds of tests, biscuits, grits, salmon, croquettes. Do that every month. Leandra Johnson, my good friend, will be here for our entertainment series. It's absolutely free. We had Eddie Levert here not long ago. It was out of the world. Yep, next. Tommy Davidson will be right here, July 9th. And I gave him a list of people to talk about. So I'm going to sit you right in the front. All right, this is our 46th anniversary, and we're really pleased to have everybody here. What we want to do now is provide our awards. I thought Stephanie was going to help me. Where is she? Tell Stephanie I need her. Yeah, I need to do the awards. Well, let me get started. So we are here today because of the benevolence of Corewell Health that is invested in the Detroit Association of Black Organizations. We appreciate their stance to push back on getting rid of DEI and all those kind of things. And so we're pleased. Is Carlos back there? Can somebody please send him out? Don't inundate Joy. She'll be too tired to talk. Rogers, can you go back there and ask them to come on out, please? Thank you. If I was in church, I'd send the ushers. Go in there and get them. All right, Carlos, this is your moment, and you're about to miss it. You got folks here from Chicago and family and everybody else. Come on, Carlos, you're getting an award. This is the Horace L. Sheffield Jr. Excellence Award. Carlos Cubio and Corewell Health for empowering David to more effectively deliver impactful health services to Detroit residents.
Wow, well, thank you, Reverend Sheffield. Thank you, DABO, for this amazing award, and thanks for putting me on the spot not knowing it was coming. You want to do a photo first while I think of what I want to say? No. But quickly, I just want to say that we as Corewell Health are very proud to be a sponsor and in partnership with Reverend Sheffield, his team, as we continue to try to provide the best health services in the city of Detroit to underrepresented, underserved areas. We know that healthcare should be a right and it should be practiced equally for everyone, but unfortunately, the reality is we don't all get the same level of care. So we are here every day working in community, working in partnership to make sure that we improve outcomes and that we remove disparities that unfortunately exist in the healthcare industry. So we will continue that. We will continue the partnership. And I just want to say thank you for allowing us to partner with you, Reverend Sheffield.
And since Joy is a good friend with Reverend L, thank you for the check. We don't charge a penny for any of this. You know, we had Eddie Levert here. We've had great performers and great people still coming, and we appreciate it because of corporate partners like that. I'm really proud to present this award to Cara Thomas, the Rochelle Sheffield Jr. Excellence Award. Cara has been a person who's poured into DABO for many years with respect to our, come on, Cara, help her up to our substance use disorder program, providing prevention services, suicide prevention services, and she's at Tabernacle Missionary Baptist Church, where Frederick G. Sampson was the pastor, that my grandmother and grandfather were two of the founding 11 members of that church.
God bless you. Reverend Sheffield is one of a kind individual, and I'm truly grateful today to be on this stage, not just with him, but at this hour, this Holy Saturday, as we call it, too. I am representing, of course, Detroit Wayne Integrated Health Network, our new director and CEO and president, Mr. James White. I'm glad to say that I have been there almost 11 years now, under the first direction of Mr. Watkins, all the way now to Mr. White. But I have to first thank also God, who has given me the strength to do this work for over 20-something years doing prevention, and of course supporting DABO as one of our phenomenal prevention providers in the community. I truly also want to say I got to thank my family here for all of the support, the encouragement, the upliftment, the love, and I would be truly remiss if I would not say that my husband, my daughter, my son over there that have made sure that I stay on track with keeping prevention. You can't talk about it and not do the work as well. You have to be that light in the midst of the community. And of course, my ancestors who have taught me how to be and steadfast in this work. So God bless you all, and thank you again.
All right, Cara, come down this way. You gonna get a picture? Yeah, let's get a picture. Come on, man. I've been licensed last week this way. All my images are now proprietary. Huh? Where y'all at today? Somebody say Jesus. All right. You know, my favorite saying is we love Jesus but can't stand nobody else. So we want y'all to have some love today. All right. Now, this young lady, we go a long way back. She and I traveled to Chicago, to DABO and other schools in Mississippi to look at what was being done to provide health services in schools. At that time, we had a council person who actually indicated we'd be performing abortions, all kind of misinformation. But we were able to secure the first grant from Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, opened the first 2 school-based health centers in the Detroit public schools. Since that time, Loretta has gone on to create her own FHAQ, what is it? Federally Qualified Health. There you go. You should know that. That's your business. So what I refer to my good friend, Loretta Davis Bush, getting the Otis Dowdy Award.
That's all right. Well, first I want to thank Reverend Sheffield. We truly do go back a long way. I'd like to thank DABO, but most importantly, you know, I really want to thank God. I have always been blessed to be in a position, to hold positions where I have been able to prevent suffering and give voice to vulnerable populations. And because I know that that is my purpose, I really have never had to work a day in my life, because when you're working in your purpose, it never really feels like work. I am grateful to still be on this path now because it's needed more than ever before. Right now at Authority Health, I have the pleasure of being the president and CEO for Authority Health, where we operate 4 outpatient clinics, and we see people regardless to their ability to pay, from birth until old age. And then also, we are training the physicians of the future. We train physicians in internal medicine, pediatrics, family medicine, and psychiatry. But most important, we also train them in trauma-informed care and anti-racism and social justice. And I know it's dangerous to say some of those words right now, but I'll say it again. We also train our physicians in anti-racism and social justice. So it's my pleasure to continue to do this work. You know, you never expect any award, but from DABO, it is a special treat and a special pleasure. Again, I want to thank DABO, and I also want to thank my amazing husband, who is always at my side and supporting everything I do. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Loretta. Loretta had the good pleasure of actually working with my dad, who, Joy, you don't know this, but my father was vice president of the Negro American Labor Council in 41 under A. Philip Randolph. He and Baird Rustin staffed the 43 March on Washington and was the first person to bring Dr. King to Detroit in 1957, introduced him to Walter Reuther, and of course got money for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. You're in the Sheffield Center, but this is a different version. This was named after my dear sister, who was superintendent of schools in Philadelphia and elsewhere, died prematurely from a urinary tract infection, which has certainly spurred my work to get people tested and know what's going on with them. So I just want to put that out there. I went and brought my sister back. If I got her sooner, she'd have been better. She was in rural South. And I just want you to know, you can have money, you can be famous, but if you're black, you're not going to be treated the same in the health system. There was no reason for my sister to have died. But that's a whole nother issue. And I grieve by building this place and having it full. That's why I had Eddie Levert here, because she loves the OJs. And I had the stylistics here too. So yeah. All right, now, what was the last? Oh, there you go. Now, we do a lot of great work, but one of the wonderful things we do is make Christmas very merry. And if you come over here Christmas, people lined up outside, bikes, clothes, I mean, food, you name it. And Barry, by the way, come on, Barry. Barry is a Goodman Acker law firm and one of the top lawyers for the Democratic Party, the governor's lawyer. I go on and on and on. He's Jewish. You know what I love about Jewish people? There's an adage that the greatest sin is to brag about what you gave. The greatest gift is to do it and nobody knows it. So what he does, he just does it, doesn't want anybody to know about it, including this gentleman right here, Gary Turgo, who's given us $750,000 to do this building. Barry, you my man. And Barry said, we got to start doing Christmas very merry again. So just if you got kids you know that don't have a Christmas, have them come over here. They'll sit on his lap. We put a beard on him, and he'll wish him Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Reverend. I really appreciate it. I'm beyond honored on behalf of myself and Goodman Acker, my law firm. It's just wonderful. I came to Michigan back in 1979, so I've been here longer than any place else, and started Goodman Acker 31 years ago. The community, especially Detroit, has been very good to Goodman Acker and the work that we do. And so I've always wanted to do community work. I've always desired to do community work and felt that I was born into doing community work, like Reverend Sheffield and so many of you here. And to culminate with getting involved in DABO and Reverend Sheffield and being their partner in this toy drive where we stepped up past Christmas with 1,500 children receiving toys, and their parents, in a surprise, left not only with their kids carrying toys out for Christmas, but an entire Christmas dinner provided to them as well. I'm proud to say that Goodman Acker will step up again and do this with DABO. This year, we're going to start a little earlier so we can try to move it up to 2,000 children in this particular Christmas. I've got 32 people at my law firm, and one of the reasons I hire them, when you talk to them, is not only about their skills as an attorney or a paralegal or a staff member, but how they care about the world they live in and whether they're continuing to take their time, even if it's over and above that 9 to 5, to make the community better. Because that's how we all, I mean, I've been suffering the last month or so because Monday to Friday at 7 o'clock, I used to watch Joy religiously. I can't see that anymore. If I forgot, my wife Janice told me, Joy's coming on, get over here. So I'm glad to meet you here again. This at least takes care of that addiction for another day. I'm surrounded by people who deeply believe in God, and it's wonderful. And I'm like most of us, are we really sure whether we are or not? I've been sure since I met my wife, Janice, because God knows that I didn't deserve anyone like her, and somehow I must have believed enough in him, and he must have believed enough in me to provide me with that. Also, besides the personal injury work we do and give back to the community, we do a lot of political work. I have Mark Brewer, 18 years as Michigan Party chair before he came to us, and one of our great clients is someone named Mary Sheffield. So we got to get her in the mayor's office in November. And so thank you again very much for this.
You know, lawyers talk long because they get paid in increments of time. Thank you. By the way, your wife told me the very same thing about you, so you guys all right. God, I didn't see her, but she showed up. We just, by the way, really got blessed by this lady of the last 3 or 4 years. She was formerly over all the national philanthropy for Comerica Bank. You know, one of our buildings were donated by Comerica. They've been funding us for 40-some years. She left to go over to Gilbert Family Foundation, and she just engineered a major grant for us. I've had the occasion to sit down with Jim Farley, CEO of Ford, and some other folks who want to actually come in this building and train people. They have diesel mechanic jobs, 4,000, pay $200,000 a year, and they can't find African Americans to fill those jobs. Well, they just contracted with DABO to not only fill those jobs, but because of a grant from Linda Nosby, we can train them right here in our neighborhood. By the way, see Stephanie, if you know somebody, I tell people, who are the candidates? That son and daughter who's sleeping in your basement and driving your car. You need to get them a job. Linda Nosby, Gilbert Family Foundation. By the way, can I tell you it was a $750,000 grant.
Good morning, everyone. I'm a woman of very little words. It's been a pleasure for the last 5 years working with DABO and the amazing work they've been doing in the community. I have been blessed in the position I've been in to be able to serve our community and being a voice in certain rooms that we typically wouldn't be in, and to make sure that we advocate for what is needed in our community. So I thank God for the job that I've had and being a blessing to organizations like DABO and the work that they do in the community. And so I do definitely honor this award. Thank you very much. I know he's not here, but I definitely want to thank my husband. He has been my backbone in allowing me to do this work. He loans me to the community to do what I do, and then when I come home, they love on me and let me know that what I'm doing is the right thing. So I definitely want to give him that shout out, even though he's not here today. So thank you.
All right, I'm gonna try to get out of the way. My lovely daughter, I'm CEO of DABO, right? It's a nonprofit. And by the way, you need to know this. The day that they were in court, we have several major grants, millions of dollars from the federal government. and they froze the payment management system. 333, when the court overruled the president, our money was available. Jerry and them have been very helpful, Jerry and Carlos, in helping us navigate that. Black Family Development got a call 3 weeks ago telling them if they didn't change their name, they would not get their federal funding. We've been put under that pressure, so we're rebranding. I wish I was Harvard and had enough money to tell them where to kiss it. But I'm not gonna make my clients suffer. So I'm CEO of DABO, but now I'm a daddy. I want to introduce my wonderful daughter, gifted, called to preach, 6 years of age. I pulled up in my driveway one day, and my daughter would always run to daddy. I opened the door, she'd run, I said, the Lord said, I called her to preach. I said, man, the Lord told me he called you to preach. She said, I told the Lord I didn't want to do that. I said, well, take it up with him. I'm just telling you what he told me. The next mayor of the city of Detroit, my daughter, Mary Sheffield. By the way, youngest elected. Let me just tell you, youngest elected to the Detroit City Council at 25, youngest council president in the history of the city of Detroit, 12 years of balanced budgets, and all the success. I'm really proud. If you weren't my daughter, I'd vote for you.
Amen. All right. Good morning, everyone. It is such an honor to be here just to bring greetings for this event. As always, I give honor and thanks to my father, Bishop Horace Sheffield, and the entire board at the Detroit Association of Black Organizations. DABO has really been a staple in this community for 46 years. Continuing to provide resources and empowerment like we're going to have today. These series, I think, are instrumental in the continued dialogue of progress for our city and our community. And so we are forever grateful that DABO continues to host these free of charge, by the way, right here in the neighborhoods of our community. So I think that we should continue to support the work that is happening here because we need this type of conversation. So we thank DABO. To Joy Ann Reid, we are so honored to have you. We are so excited. I can't wait to hear from you. Such a powerful black woman who has really set the standard in a lot of ways, has broke barriers, and has a voice that is so strong and so powerful that it cannot be silenced. It will never be silenced. We know that. So I wanted to be here to properly welcome you on behalf of the great city of Detroit, that we love you, we honor you, we respect your work. And so I have an award of recognition on behalf of the city of Detroit, presented to Joanne Reid for your groundbreaking contributions to political journalism, your unwavering commitment to truth, to equity and civic engagement. We honor your powerful voice that will never be silenced and your enduring impact on the national discourse. And this is on behalf of the Detroit City Council and the city of Detroit. God bless you. Thank you so much for all that you do.
Lauren. Where's Lauren? Okay. Oh. Oh, you want to get on? Touch the flag. Yes, sir. All right, let's get out the way. Let's get ready for Joanne Reid. Whose phone is their phone? All right. I have been training this young lady. My granddaughter, my oldest granddaughter, and I have another one who's 15 months. And she gets mad because I coo over the 15-month-old. She reads at a 10th grade level. She self-identifies as a genius, and she had to get into a person who told her she wasn't. And she read him the riot act, but she's extremely gifted. She speaks, she's introduced the governor. I mean, all of that kind of stuff. This is my favorite grandchild, Lauren McKenzie Scruggs. Come on, Lauren. She's going to introduce our speaker.
Well, firstly, there's no such thing as a favorite grandchild. But anyways, I am so happy to see you all here, even the ones that didn't make it. but I am just so happy for the faithful, factual, amazing woman that Joyanne Reid has taught me to become. Maybe I may not be the oldest here, of course not, but I've learned so much from every single one of you, and even if I might not have met you yet, you're still the most amazing person and have the most amazing personality that anybody could love. And I'm just so honored to welcome Joyanne Reid to the Bridge Center.
Carlos, it's your show.
All right. How's everybody doing? All right. Well, great. Well, I'm going to take some privileges here, Reverend Sheffield, since I have the mic, because I think my acceptance was really weak, because I did not thank my beautiful wife for 33 years. Stand up. 33 years. My family that came all the way from Chicago to be here today, not for me, but for Joyanne Reid, but my family. And the Corwell family. Corwell. Raise your hand, Corwell. These folks right here, the Corwell family, work every single day in community to make sure that they are providing the most equitable, fair, and just outcomes in terms of treatment. They do this every day because it's their passion. And I think, and I'm going to forget the young lady's name in the purple, Loretta said, they don't go to work every day. They come to serve every day. And so thank you, Corwell, for being here. Thank you, family. My son, Carlos II, right here. And I see in about 5 or 10 years, he's going to be sitting up here doing this exact same thing. So let's get going. Y'all ready to hear from Miss Joyanne Reid? Wow. So first of all, I feel like I'm talking to family up here because we have been running to that TV every day for so long. And we feel like we know you. And when I told my wife, who was supposed to be out of town on another trip, she's like, oh, no, we changing plans. So we're going to be here today to see you, Joyanne Reid. And so for those of you, the one or two of you that may not know who this woman is, she is a filmmaker, an author, a mother, a wife, and I think you just celebrated 28 years, your wedding anniversary?
That's correct.
28 years, yes. She's a member of the Divine Nine. Which one would that
Delta
be?
Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated.
I knew that. And for those in the back, now, she came in here, and she said, I got to make a quick change. And she had these beautiful black red bottoms in her bag that she was going to throw on. What's those, Christian Louboutin? So that's
Louboutin,
above my pay grade, but Christian Louboutin. But I said, no, you got to play the sneaker game that she got on up here. I said, don't change those shoes. So that just shows you the versatility that this woman has. And you've done so much in your life, and the folks want to hear from you and not from me. But I do want to talk a little bit about some of your accomplishments. 2005 NAACP award for your book, Medgar and Merle, which hopefully you'll tell us a little bit about. 2025 Image Award for the Readout. You have awards from the Women's Media Center, the National Action Network, the National Association of Black Journalists, nominated for an Emmy and a GLAAD Award, and that's just a few on page 1. So we won't go through everything, but what I want you to know is this woman is accomplished. She's a truth teller, she's a voice for the people, and this work for her is a passion. It is not a job. So Joy, let's talk about a little bit about your early years. Tell us where you're from, where you grew up, and a little bit about your family.
Well, before I do that, I want to thank DABO for having me here. This is exciting. I didn't know I was coming to a party. I'm actually glad I kept the chucks, so at least I could feel like I'm in the community. We did have a fashion meeting in the back. That actually did happen. And I want to thank Reverend Bishop Sheffield for having me here at the Sheffield Center and everyone who coordinated to make all this happen. It is really an honor to be here and to thank you, my friend, for having me as well. And so I am originally from Brooklyn, New York, and we know Detroit, the Motor City, is the greatest, but I got a rep for Brooklyn, New York. I come from East Flatbush, Brooklyn, New York. My mother immigrated and wound up in New York from Guyana, what used to be called British Guyana. My father came from the Democratic Republic of Congo. They came in the 60s, somehow met in Iowa. I cannot explain how they both ended up in Iowa. Right. And then I had my sister in Iowa, and then I was born in Brooklyn. Then we moved when I was 2 to Denver, Colorado. So I grew up in Denver, Colorado. Grew up a Bronco fan. Sorry, I know y'all team is
Bronco
I know,
fan.
I know. You have to be a Bronco fan or they kick you out the state. It's just part of it. We were football people. But anyway, and also New York Giants. That was my NFC team, was the Giants. I'm sorry, I apologize.
We may need security.
We
up
got to
here.
have security to get me out of here a lot. But so bottom line is I grew up in Denver, wound up at Harvard University, and then long story short, was a pre-med when I went into Harvard. But my mom passed away about 23 days before the start of my freshman year, and that kind of veered me off of pre-med. I kind of, needed to take a minute. I wound up taking a year off and trying to figure out what to do. So I went back to East Flatbush to live with my aunt. There were 2 girls in my mom's family. It was just the 2 of them, my auntie and my mom, and everybody else were boys. It was like 9 of them, and there were 2 girls. They were very, very close. So close that they had kids like literally at the same time. So my sister, my brother, and I all have a cousin that's directly our age, and then we have one older one. And the 3 cousins our age used to spend every summer with us. So we kind of grew up like siblings. So I moved back into my auntie's house, and I had to figure out what I was going to do with my life. And I wound up getting a job at Columbia Pictures as like a secretary. And living after I couldn't stay with my auntie too long because, we grew up in a Methodist church. And she was an evangelical Baptist, which meant 4 nights a week of church. And Sunday church was about 3 hours. And I was like, yeah, this is a lot. So I ended up moving out, moving into my own place. And I ended up moving into Fort Greene, Brooklyn, which was Spike Lee's world at that time. And I got so, sort of enveloped in this whole film world, went back and became a documentary film major. So that is what my degree is in from Harvard, is documentary film.
Wow. So my next question was going to be, what childhood influences led you to where you are today? But talk a little bit more about once you got into that, some of the experiences that led you to the platform that you have today.
Well, it's interesting because it really never made sense for me to be a pre-med. I'm really a pre-med because Caribbean people are supposed to be pre-med. Like literally, if you're Caribbean American, it's like you have doctor, lawyer, architect. And so my sister was gonna be the lawyer, I was gonna be the doctor, my brother was gonna be the architect. Like that's just how it is in Caribbean families. And I said that at about age 12. I didn't really mean it, but it stuck. And so that's what you're expected to do. But once I was sort of in a way liberated from that expectation, I actually went back to where I started. Because when I was growing up, I was a news junkie. I loved sports and news. Those are my 2 things, and the Sunday New York Times crossword. I was a full nerd. I loved, I actually like to read the books they assigned us in school. I was really into history, but I really loved politics. And when I was in about 6th grade, aging myself, the Iran hostage crisis started. And, I used to sit up with my mom and watch the news because she was also a news junkie. And she would let me sit up and watch the 11 o'clock news. And afterwards, they did this thing that they used to call the countdown special about the hostage crisis, which became Nightline. And my mom let me sit up and watch it, even though I was in 6th grade. She was like, okay, you can stay up because it's news. And I watched that every single day of that 300 some odd day ordeal every night. And I was just fascinated by it and by the Middle East and sort of trying to understand who are these people, why would they take these hostages, and then just became interested in news in general. And so while I did that, and I also loved to write. I would write poetry, I would write short stories, I would make my sister and brother listen to my stories that I would orally tell them. I was like into story and I was into news, but I was a pre-med, so it didn't match. So once I went back to Harvard and decided I was gonna switch to documentary, I was really going back to what I really was meant to do. And so it's sort of like God kind of speaks to you in a weird way, right? Puts you where you're supposed to be, even if it's in a difficult and painful way.
Yeah. But when I think about documentary filmmaking, that's behind the camera. You ended up in front of the camera. Yeah. So let's talk about that. What was your first big break, and how did you end up on the desk?
So what wound up happening is that I moved to, after college, I moved to New York. I took a job at School of Visual Arts, which is where I met my husband, Jason. I'm going to shout him out, even though he's not here. My daughter's here, but he's not here. And I came out of school like, I'm going to be Spike Lee. I'm going to make documentaries, I'm going to make movies, I'm going to do features, this is what I'm going to do, but I need a crew. Yeah. So I went to School of Visual Arts just to get a job there in the production office. My husband was actually born in England, and he had to go home for a year to get his, immigration status right, so he could go to college. So we're the same age, but he was 1 year behind me educationally. So he was working for me at the production office. This is before Me Too, y'all. So we started dating. I was his supervisor, let's just be clear. But again, Me Too was not a thing yet, so it was fine. So we started dating. And then we actually formed a little production company, and rather than make documentary feature films, we wound up doing a reggae music video show, true story. It was called Video Dub Plate. He was the director, I was the producer, and we were a crew of about 6 young black people. And so my big break really was Video Dub Plate. It was this reggae music video show. We won an award for it. We were competing with Ralph McDaniels, which was like the big hip hop show that was on in New York. We were competing with New York Hot Tracks. Like we were going around the community shooting interviews with people like Shabba Ranks and Shaggy. We met Shaggy when he was really young, young Marleys. We were shooting all these interviews, and wherever we would go, we would be the only black crew. And because I had a marketing mindset, I had these black jackets made with our logo on the back. So they would see these 6 young black folks coming, and all the artists who would be in the room. I mean, we met Mary J. Blige this way. We would walk around, and all these artists would see these black people, and all the other camera crews were all white. Even if it was a black show, all of the production crews were just white. So they would gravitate toward us. So we would get interviews we really had no reason to get. Most of them were all still at School of Visual Arts. They were students, and I was the only non-student. And so we were 20, 21 years old and getting interviews with, you name it, we got interviews with them. And so the show won an award, and one time our host was not available to do the show, but we had a big interview, so I wound up doing it. So that was my first on-air gig, was actually hosting Video Dub Plate instead of producing it. From there, we wound up moving to Florida. Long story short, I'll collapse the story. Got pregnant, moved, then got married, because I was pregnant again. Long story short, Jason's grandmother, who I adopted as my grandmother, she said, "You have to marry her, you can't just, so she made us get married because I was pregnant.
Y'all pick up on that accent, right? Y'all get that?
She's Jamaican. Yeah. They're Jamaican. So she was like, "You have to marry that gal. It's a good gal. You have to marry her." So I said, we got married. Moved to Florida. And I couldn't, obviously the show, we couldn't do the video show anymore. They were all in New York. And I wound up taking a job at the Fox affiliate in Miami, WSVN, as a morning show writer. I would write the morning show, and I was a producer.
That's a story, y'all. Fox affiliate.
It was a Fox affiliate, so I know Fox from the inside. One of the little secrets I'll give you about Fox is one of their secrets is gamma. If you're not familiar with production, gamma is the intensity of the colors and the light that you see on screen. Fox turns their gamma up really high because it gets your adrenaline system going. If you watch Fox, you start to get hype just because of the way it looks. Whereas CBS, which is a much more female audience and an older audience, has very low gamma. If you switch directly from Fox to CBS, try it on your screen one time. It's kind of jarring because it almost goes from high gamma to low gamma. Right? And
we getting the inside scoop, y'all.
There's stuff that they do to keep you addicted.
Right. Wow.
And Fox keeps you adrenaline hyped. Wow. All of the weather women had major breast implants, and they looked like the Fox National women. They all looked the same. They had the same lip implants and the same cheek implants, and there was a look to being at Fox, and this is their local. And anyway, I wrote for that morning show, and then I ended up switching because we moved near where the NBC affiliate was. So I wound up working for the NBC affiliate as a digital editor, and I worked there right up until until the start of the Iraq War. And the Iraq War, I was completely opposed to it. And while I was at NBC's affiliate, WTVJ, I started writing an op-ed, a weekly op-ed for the Miami Herald, because they had gotten their first black op-ed editor. And a white guy named Ike Siemens, who was this old, craggy white dude, but who was like a mentor to me. He just liked me because he would bring all his books when he would overflow his library, and he would leave them and say, anybody who wants the books could take them. Only the nerd would take them. I was the only one who would take the books. Everyone else ignored the books. So he took a liking to me, and he was like, "You know what? You're a smart girl. You really ought to be writing for the Miami Herald." So he introduces me to this first black editor of the Miami Herald. He hires me to do an op-ed. My very first op-ed was against the war.
Against the war.
It was against the Iraq War. And unfortunately, the people at Miami Herald put my work email, because you had to put an email address on it. Mm-hmm. And they used my work email, and I almost got fired. That was the first time I almost got fired by NBC. And Ike defended me. He said, "You have a First Amendment right to have your opinion about the war." And people would come up to me in the newsroom and whisper, "We really agree with you." Because, but they weren't courageous enough to say it out loud because people knew that the official position of the United States media was for the war. And everyone had the flag pins on. There was a lot of pressure to go along with it, even though the level of jingoism and rooting for a war that to me made no sense. It was too much. So I ended up quitting. I just quit. And every so often I would do like a little on-air thing for the web, but I was a web person, so nobody was listening to me. I ended up quitting, and I took this thing called Wellstone Action Network Training, which you may have heard because the last vice presidential nominee, the governor of Minnesota, he took that training the year after I did, Tim Walz. I took it the year before he did, and I wound up being it trained you to either be a candidate or a press secretary or a field operative politically. And I trained for the press secretary track, and I wound up working for a George Soros-funded organization called America Coming Together. And we tried to defeat George W. Bush, to help defeat George W. Bush in '04. We lost. But through that, I had this sort of winding path to get back to TV, which is that after we lost the election, I wound up working in talk radio because I just happened to meet a guy called James T. Thomas, who was the biggest thing in talk radio, but in music talk radio in Florida. But he had gotten hired by Radio 1 to host a talk show. And he'd never hosted a talk show before. He was very popular, but he'd never hosted a talk show, and he needed a producer. And for a mutual friend said, if you go to this Martin Luther King Day event, he's gonna be there and you can meet him. So I walked up on stage and I said, my name is Joy Ann Reid. Do you need a producer for your talk radio show? I'd love to do it. And he just hired me, gave me a chance.
Right there on the spot.
He said, I'm gonna talk to you about it. We had an interview, we had a formal interview, but he believed in me, gave me the opportunity. I wound up on talk radio, and then I ultimately was his co-host on talk radio. And then from there, I got back into campaigns because in 2008, a guy named Barack Obama was running for president. And some of my friends from the '04 campaign were working on his campaign. And in the interim, Radio 1, Kathy Hughes had sold all of the talk radio stations, including ours. So I had to get back out and get a job. I wound up getting a job on the Obama campaign. And when you win, everybody wants you. And suddenly MSNBC was like, let's book this lady. And I became a frequent guest on Hardball and other shows, and that's how I got back in.
How you introduced you. But so thank you for that. And I do want to ask you something that you said about the folks coming up to you whispering, saying, thank you for that, we agree with you. What that says to me is that people still in this day can't openly talk about and express their real views. So let's talk about how people's views are silenced and they can't really express themselves. We talk about all the time about having your voice, using your voice matters, but when you use your voice, you pay a price. So talk to me about that.
No, it's true. I mean, I don't know if y'all remember the atmosphere in the United States during the Iraq War. I mean, it's really unheard of for journalists. Can you imagine journalists during Vietnam putting a flag pin on and promoting the war? That's insane. And people people talk about Walter Cronkite and how he was the objective journalist sort of standard. Right. But Walter Cronkite at one point came out and very famously said the war is a mistake, that this war cannot be won and it is immoral. That is Walter Cronkite, the Mr. Objectivity. He announced this war is over and it is immoral and wrong. And that is what, in many ways, turned the tide in the war. Dr. King, who Lyndon Johnson thought was an eternal ally after he signed the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, came out publicly against the war and was rebuked across this country, including by black churches who said he was out of his lane. So being against that war, there was also huge pressure to be against it, but Walter Cronkite in the media stood against it. Fast forward to the Iraq War, no one would admit they were against it. The New York Times promoted the war. They put on their pages absolute lies about the Saddam Hussein regime, which again, was a horrible regime, but they didn't do 9/11. And I remember interviewing, even though I was a digital editor, and we would do the show meetings, and I would always have a pitch of a story, and people would look around like, why is the digital girl talking? Why is she always? Do we have to listen to the digital girl?
The digital girl.
No one wanted to hear from the digital girl. But I was very hyped to use this platform and this access to my small little access to the public and to a platform to get stories out. I remember interviewing a guy who was a master's degree holding he was a retired military because he had been injured and couldn't serve anymore. But his brother was in Iraq, and his brother's wife had been pregnant on 9/11, and her due date was 9/11. And he said, can you imagine my brother, I'm trying to take care of his wife who has this newborn young child, this young child to raise, and he's literally in Iraq fighting the man who caused 9/11. And I'm like, that's not accurate. But 70% of Americans believed what he believed. It was that Saddam Hussein had done 9/11. If you can convince millions of Americans that this person over here committed this terrorist act, you can get them to go along with a war. Most Democrats went along with the war. Hillary Clinton went along with the war, which is why Barack Obama beat her. Because those who thought about it for a minute and said, is it logical? Because now, again, I grew up as a sort of Middle East obsessed. I was obsessed with the region. I was interested in the region. So I knew the difference between Iran and Iraq.
Yep.
And I understood that the idea that a Sunni, who was considered an apostate, let's just be clear, Saddam Hussein was considered, because he was an Alawite, he was like a very small niche section of Sunni Islam, but he was considered an apostate. If Saddam Hussein, if Osama bin Laden had met Saddam Hussein, he probably would have killed him.
Right.
Because they would have considered him an apostate, right? Why would they team up and do a terrorist act together when these two really, they hate each other?
Right.
They're enemies.
Well, if you tell
It
a
didn't make
story
sense to me.
long enough, and people start to
They
hear
just
it over
believe it.
and over and over, they start to believe it. Hence the term, where they talk about fake news.
Fake news.
Right. And so when people talk about these things and they get a platform, there's nobody out there to kind of counter that. So that's all they're getting. So I would like you to talk a little bit about that whole notion of how we're flooding the market with this fake news and what that's doing to our society. And we're going to jump around, y'all. I'm just telling y'all right now. We're going to jump around. Yeah. So.
Well, right now, I think a great example of that is what's happening to Kilmar Abrego Garcia.
Yes.
Okay, and I live in the DMV now, so he's Maryland is one of the places where we spend a lot of time, where we live. This guy is a construction worker from Maryland who has been rendered, is the right term, or kidnapped or abducted is a more accurate term, and sent not to, quote unquote, his home country, as the current administration keeps saying. Yes, he's originally from El Salvador, but he wasn't landed in El Salvador and released. He's been put in prison in El Salvador. And here's the problem with that. He hasn't been convicted of a crime in El Salvador, and he hasn't been convicted of a crime in the United States. So, but the story that's being told on conservative media, and again, I have some familiarity with Fox, the way they operate, what they're doing is just repeating over and over again that he's a criminal and a terrorist. Here's the problem with that. The current president has used the Alien Enemies Act in order to declare one particular gang, Tren de Aragua. This Venezuelan gang is now considered a terrorist organization with whom I guess we're at war, because the Alien Enemies Act has only been used 3 times in American history. The War of 1812, when we went to war with Britain, and Britain, which is now Canada, burned the White House to the ground.
Right.
And beat us. We didn't win the War of 1812. World War I.
Okay.
And World War II, when FDR used the Alien Enemies Act to lock up Japanese Americans. They were not Japanese people, they were Americans of Japanese descent. Evil, the worst thing he ever did, most immoral thing FDR ever did. That's the only time, it's never been used against a gang.
Right.
Tren de Aragua is a Venezuelan gang. Mr. Abrego Garcia is Salvadoran. He's from El Salvador. He's not Venezuelan.
Right.
Problem number 2, they're not saying that he's in Tren de Aragua. They're saying that he's in MS-13, which is a totally different gang, totally separate gang, and that in this country is primarily operating in places like New York. They're saying he's a part of a New York branch of MS-13. Problem with that, he's never lived in New York.
Right.
So how is it like a Zoom-based gang? Like, do they meet online? Like, how is he in this gang?
It's a Teams chat.
Right. Yeah. Problem number 3 is he does have a relationship to a gang, but as a victim. Yeah. His family in El Salvador used to sell food. Like, you know how you have people by the side of the road that sell different kinds of food. And they used to sell out of their home. They were a home-based business.
Okay.
And they got to be really successful and really popular. People knew them as like the food guys. The gang, which is called, I'm gonna forget the first name, but the last number in it is 18, something 18. This gang threatened the family that if they don't start paying them, like, you know, the way gangs extort people, they said, well, we're gonna need you to pay us because you're making too much money. And if you don't, or if the older brother, Cesar, does not join the gang, we're going to rape the sister and kill the parents. So they did what any sane people would do in that they got gone. They pieced out of El Salvador.
Right.
They came to they sent Cesar first, then they sent Kilmar with him to stay with him, and then eventually the parents came and the sister. So the family is now left for their fear of their lives.
Wow.
So he has a pending asylum claim saying that he cannot be sent back to El Salvador for fear of that gang.
Right.
Because that gang has still got a death order on him because he wouldn't pay them or join them.
And he was granted that asylum, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
Right.
An immigration judge did. But the problem that he's having now is that he has tattoos. Our current defense secretary is covered in tattoos.
Right.
Some of them are deeply anti-Muslim. Is he in a gang? This guy has tattoos, but how many Americans have them? Dolly Parton. You know when Dolly Parton is, if you could see more of her body, that lady is tatted.
Yeah.
A lot of tats.
Wow. Okay.
Is she in a gang?
Wow.
They're saying if you have they have arrested people and said they're in a gang because they have they have a crown. Anyone with a crown is in this gang. One guy that they've sent to this horrific prison, CICOT in El Salvador, his crown tattoo is over a soccer ball because his favorite soccer team, Manchester United, that's their symbol. They're saying that means he's in the gang. They grabbed a a makeup artist, a gay makeup artist from Venezuela and put him in this El Salvadoran prison. He's got a crown tattoo because he is like bigging up queens because he's like a makeup artist. Anyone with a tattoo who's Latino, they're saying you're in this gang and and they're not putting any of them on trial. So the problem with disinformation, and especially disinformation coming from the White House, coming from the Department of Justice, and coming from right-wing social media, is it's locking people into a construct that says this person is a criminal terrorist and it's good to get him out of the country. Our current Attorney General even said his family's better off that he's out of the country. Wow. But he's never been tried or convicted of a crime. That's the kind of stuff England used to do, which is why we had a revolution against them. You can't just put someone in prison because they are the wrong color and have the wrong tattoos without a trial or without due process. But that's what we're doing right now in America.
So two things. When I think about that situation, last week I was with a group of individuals, and I'll leave them out of the conversation because they're not here to speak for themselves. But they said that they're concerned that this can happen to them as African Americans, and what's to stop them from being deported and sent to these prisons under some type of, you're a terrorist and we're getting you out of the country.
Nothing.
Should we be concerned?
Of course you should.
Yeah.
Because so what we have to understand as black folks, we understand that when America catches a cold, we catch a fever. And that anything that is cooked up and conjured to harm any group will eventually get to us. Yeah. The two people, the train is never late. They always get to the Jews and they always get to the blacks.
Yeah.
Eventually. Okay.
You know, yeah.
Am I wrong? They get to the
Not
Jews and they get to the blacks.
Yeah.
And the reality is that now you can add, and this is, pretty prescient in Detroit, and I was just staying, we were just staying in Dearborn, they also get to the Muslims.
Yeah.
They get to them quick.
Yeah.
And by the way, as black people, a third of us are the Muslims.
Right. Yeah.
Third of blacks are Muslim.
That's
most
facts.
blacks who came to this country, most Africans who came here were Muslims. My mother's grandmother was an enslaved person who was taken from Ghana, and she and her mother were Muslim. They only converted to Christianity in slavery. Yeah. So the reality is, yes, it could happen to anyone because they have picked up, and men and women without uniforms sometimes not showing badges, have taken Puerto Ricans who are American citizens, have questioned citizen Latinos, full citizens with birth certificates from the United States.
Wow.
They have taken Black Muslim students.
Yep.
There's a gentleman they deported to his home country in Africa, not because he committed a crime, but because he wrote an op-ed supporting the right of Palestinians to live.
Yeah.
They are taking people, Mahmoud, I think his name is Mahmoud Kilal, I think his name is. He was taken not because he committed a crime, but again, ideological reasons, because he led protests at Columbia University for Palestinians. They're literally taking you for ideological reasons, racial reasons, color of your skin, not content of your character. It will eventually get to all of us. Because among the protesters, let's start just with the protesters who are being taken. I've covered the protests at Columbia. We had a great, Antonia Hilton, who's a terrific journalist, she was on site for a lot of those protests. Those protesters included white folks, African Americans, Black immigrants, Jewish students. It was a full gamut. Any of those people is now subject not to just arrest, but to rendering. Last thing I'll say is they're doing this in a way that is even worse than rendering someone to another country because you genuinely think they're a criminal. They're paying Chris Van Hollen, who's the United States Senator from Maryland, who finally was let into CICOT, into this prison, to see Mr. Abrego Garcia. After he was denied being let in, even though Republican members of Congress have been able to go and take selfies, Abu Ghraib style selfies. I mean, remember Abu Ghraib when we had our people, our military posing with Iraqis who were being humiliated. They're, the Homeland Security Secretary, Kristi Noem, who last time I checked was barred as governor from going to a third of her state because indigenous tribes were so offended by her treatment of them. Now she's Homeland Security Secretary. She did like a photo op in front of this CICOT prison, and now that's become a fad, where United States members of the United States Congress are going and posing in front of it with thumbs up, and it's gross and disgusting. But when the senator from where this man lives, he has an American wife and 3 American-born children, 2 of them are disabled. When he finally gets in to see him, when he goes, they tell him, you can't see him. Then they let him see him, and the vice president of El Salvador tells him that the reason they can't release him is because the US government paid them to take him. And the US government is paying $25,000 US a head to El Salvador to take these people and put them in prison without a trial. That sounds to me like kidnapping.
Wow. So I'm
and
just...
again, last thing I'll say, I'm
Wait,
sorry to keep
no,
going
keep
over,
going, keep
but
going.
again, in the case, I apologize, but in the case of Mr. Abrego Garcia, they can't even agree what gang he's in. Is he in MS-13? Is he in Tren de Aragua, or is he in this other gang? They don't even know which gang. They can't even, he's not in the Venezuelan gang because he's not Venezuelan. He can't be in MS-13 because he wasn't in New York. And the informant that claims he was in MS-13 is the only source of their insistence that he's in a gang. And the last piece is their own official testified in court under penalty of perjury that his deportation was a mistake. But now they're trying to pretend like they never said that, and they fired the guy who put that in the affidavit.
This is America, y'all. Well, this is America.
It's giving 1930s, is all I'm saying.
Yes, it's very reminiscent. And don't feel like you have to give me the mic. I just want to listen. I just want to, first of all, say that it amazes me the amount of knowledge that you have in that head of yours. And you're just spitting it like it's like you're reading from a teleprompter. What is your passion? Yeah. Talk to me. Talk to me about your passion. What motivates you? Why are you so concerned about this? Other than the obvious, but
yeah, I mean, I'm obsessed with history. I'm a history buff. I'm not sure why. I only majored in documentary instead of history because I was just like taken with Spike Lee and was trying to be Baby Spike. But I love history. I think it's interesting because history is so informative of the present. And I am kind of fascinated by the human tick of repeating it of repeating the same mistakes over and over again. There's something about humans that they can't stop doing, particularly the bad things that people in the past have done, and doing them like almost to the letter. You know, I mean, America First was originally a fascist movement in the 1930s, a very openly fascist movement. That the point of America First was for white Anglo-Saxon Protestants to resume or to assume permanent racial superiority in America. And then Ronald Reagan unironically picked up America First as his slogan in 1980. And he said America First and launched his campaign in Philadelphia, Mississippi, where Goodman, Schwerner, and Cheney were lynched. And at the Neshoba County Fair there, which had a connection to the lynching. And that seemed deliberate. That seemed like he knew he was doing that. And that was 12 years after Dr. King was assassinated. So it's not like he didn't know. You know what I mean? Like, this was 12 years later after King was assassinated. So people do things that sometimes feel deliberate and feel like it's too on message. Trump and Elon Musk feel like they are either attempting to reproduce and recreate the same vibrations of the 1930s, or they just don't know any better and are doing it by accident. Something's up here, right? I mean, Elon Musk's grandparents were from Canada.
Right.
You know, the country that beat us in War of 1812. They were Britain back then, but they were pro-Nazi. And so they moved to white South Africa because they felt more comfortable in a country that was doing apartheid. And I always used to tell my team at the readout, every time you hear a story and then you hear another story, in your mind you think these are 2 or 3 stories. They're almost always one story.
Right.
South Africa modeled apartheid, which they started in 1948, after Jim Crow in the United States. Nazi Germany modeled their final solution against the Jews on Jim Crow in the United States. The United States was the laboratory for white supremacy in every single way you can think of. Well, all the way back. If you go back before the 15th century, there was no such thing as a white person. White and black as concepts did not exist. In what they call the Dark Ages, when the Moors essentially took over Europe, no one called them black. They were Moors. And nobody white called themselves white. They were either Britons, or they were Celts, or they were some other tribe of what we now call white people. But they felt no connection to each other, which is why they had 40,000 wars against each other. They were constantly at war because they didn't see themselves as a group. And nobody on the African continent saw themselves as black or as a group. They were Hausa people or Kikuyu people. They were a different tribe. And that's why they would have wars, because they didn't see themselves as black, as a group. And when they would intermix with each other or with people from what they now call Asia, they didn't see themselves as a group, which is why, you know, China and Japan and Korea, they could all fight each other. They never saw themselves as one people. But something happened when the churches in England launched the Age of Exploration. And in 1492, which we think of as the Columbus sailed the ocean blue, something else happened, which was that the churches in England, the Catholic Church and the Presbyterian Church, issued an edict saying, explore the world, because we want gold to build our churches. Go find us some gold. Bring it back. And if you find any people where you're going, you have 2 options. Try to convert them to Christianity, or feel free to kill or enslave them.
Wow.
And Columbus and all these other explorers did that. They went all over the world looking for gold. They found a lot in Africa, so they enslaved a lot of Africans, and they found that enslaving them was a very lucrative business. And then when they got to the Americas and they tried to enslave the indigenous people here, a lot of them died because of diseases. They weren't, the germs that the Europeans were bringing killed a lot of the natives, and then whoever the germs didn't kill, they just killed because they wanted their land. Wipe them out, take their land. But they couldn't enslave, there weren't enough of them left to enslave them, so they started bringing Africans over here. But they also started bringing Irish over here, who also have suffered slavery. You know, St. Patrick's Day? St. Patrick was a slave.
Right.
right? But it wasn't hereditary, but it was a slave. So they brought some Irish over here. But then they realized, oh, wait a minute, it's more them than us. It's like us on the stage and all of y'all.
Yeah, right.
And so they're like, well, how do we on this stage, you and me, control all of them? Because some of them might turn on us. So what if we got some of them to be on our side? And we invented this thing called white. So they said to the Irish, yes, you're a slave, you're an indentured servant right now, but you are white. Therefore, you can opt out of slavery at some point.
If you join us.
You're going to be on our side, even though you're poor, you're dirt poor, you're uneducated, you're filthy, it don't matter. You're white. And they invented this thing called black to separate Africans from ever having freedom. And so they said, if you're black, you are a congenital slave. They invented something that never existed. There had been slavery. The Romans did it. The Greeks did it. Everybody did slavery. That's the big excuse the right always says. Everybody did. Yeah, everybody did. But it was never hereditary until here. Then in the United States, they invented something called chattel slavery. So they said, if you're black and we designate you as black, you are the equivalent of a cow or a horse. You are not a human anymore. You are chattel.
Property.
And this had never existed, nor had whiteness existed, nor had blackness existed, but it became very convenient for the Jeffersonian enslavers to create these divisions. And they just kept exploiting them. W.B. Du Bois calls it. They made whiteness a wage. They said whiteness is worth more than gold. It's better to be white than to have a decent life, than to have a union, than to have a good job. You would rather be dead than be black. You definitely don't want to be black. And while they're doing that, they're also making different kinds of black people by raping all the black women. Wow. And they raped so many black women that they had categories they created in the census. Quadroon, octoroon. Wow. They created all these categories because they were just creating all these other, and this was the only place where they created black people, not by importing more and more and more like they did in the Caribbean, but by making them breed here, by breeding slaves. This never happened before on any planet, in any country, on any continent. This is the only country, and every other country watched what the Europeans here did and created versions of the horrors that Americans did. Wow. And so we informed, so you have to know the full story of the world to really understand what's happening to you. If you were in Namibia, your people were in concentration camps before the Jews in Germany. They tried it on them first and put them in, and if you see the pictures of the Namibians who were locked in concentration camps, it looks exactly like the Jews in Germany. Germans did it in Africa first.
Wow.
And
Y'all listening?
I mean, it's just the reality. So this is the reason my passion is history, because it's the only way I can explain the insanity that I see people do, the cruelty. I need it to make sense to me. So history helps it make sense.
Yeah, well, history does help. Okay. Come on, all. I just want to make sure y'all awake, man, because we getting a master class up here, and it probably speaks to why we're trying to erase history. And to make it unavailable and take the books out of the school so that you can't learn, because if you know your history, you will fight to not repeat it. But if you don't know it, it's going to sneak back up on you. So I think it's important that we take this lesson and then go out on our own and continue to educate yourselves and those around you on the importance of how we got here. Joyce, thank you for that. Joy, social issues. Not that there are many out there, but let's see if we can find one. What do you believe are the most pressing issues facing racial minorities in America today?
I mean, the erasure, is number one.
Erasure.
Right. I mean, the daughters of the Confederacy did this game first, right? Where after the Civil War, the daughters and wives and nieces of the Confederate soldiers decided, well, we can't have our men looking like the bad guys. Let's just rewrite history. And they took over the textbooks and they put up statues that most of them went up in like the 1930s. You know what I mean? None of these statues existed. You think about it. Can you imagine, like, if after World War II, we put up statues of Hirohito? Or Hitler? That would be crazy, right? But we have statues all over the place of Robert E. Lee. Yeah. Robert E. Lee died a man without a country. He couldn't even get his letter read to beg for his citizenship back because he was a traitor.
Right.
And yet, Robert E. Lee, we're naming stuff after Confederate generals, having them have bases, Fort Bragg, and all that stuff. I mean, it makes no sense. It shouldn't make sense, right? That we're like lionizing the people who went to war against. Like, they literally killed Union soldiers, and yet they are the good guys, and the Union are the bad guys, and the war wasn't about slavery. Like, what? But that erasure of history has informed almost all of us in terms of the way we were raised in the textbooks we read, right? You grew up not knowing the full history of the Civil War and kind of wondering what the Civil War was even about, because we're told in our textbooks that it wasn't about slavery. But if you literally read the Articles of Secession of every single state, starting with South Carolina, it says in like line 2, we cannot exist without slaves. We can't make it in this state without slaves. It will destroy our economy. The blacks must remain slaves forever, therefore we secede. They all said that, but we learned something different, and we don't even read the Articles of Secession, right? So I think erasure is the biggest threat, because we only have gotten here to this ignorant place to be able to repeat America first for the 3rd time, to be able to start to give a 1930s vibe to our government, because Americans generally don't know. People generally don't know what's happening. They don't know, they aren't curious enough about history or the past, and so they don't know. So I think erasure is a big thing. They are literally deleting the presence of people like Jackie Robinson and Medgar Evers as if they never existed. If you can make a people not, Carter G. Woodson said this, if you can make a people not exist, give them no history, give them nothing to hang themselves on, to hang their ego on, then you can do with them what you will. If the next generation of black people in a super black city like Detroit, if your grandchildren are being taught that black people never did anything heroic, that they never participated in any heroic way in any war, that women never participated in the sciences, that there were never any women scientists. They just didn't exist. 20 years from now, when all this stuff is gone, a child may believe that there's never been an Asian American of repute in any instance in this country anywhere. It just hasn't happened, that only white men, and only the right white men, only Christian white men, only straight white men, because there's never been any gay people. They literally took the trans people out of Stonewall. The trans people did Stonewall. Black trans women, they are gone from the Stonewall Memorial. I've been interviewing, because I'm doing this Substack, joyandreid.com, hopefully you'll tell me. But I've been talking on background to a lot of people who work for the Parks Department, the National Park Service, and things like they're being told they can't say if they work, like, let's say at a plantation, an old plantation. They can't really explain why the enslaved people are there. They can't say anything about any of the races of the people involved. So you're left with this sort of vagary, well, who were the slaves and who were the other? Some people. But who did the slavery? Somebody.
Yeah, somebody did it. We don't know who.
Who did these? They're taking away the Holocaust history. Well, who was responsible for the Holocaust? Somebody. Were they German? You know what I mean?
Right.
But and the low-wage person. So what are they supposed to do? Get fired?
So it's interesting, and I don't know if everyone's aware about this whole notion of putting board members on the Smithsonian so that they can go and take the divisive information out of all of the Smithsonian museums.
Yeah, what's divisive in the Smithsonian?
Talk about that. Talk about that. I'm sorry. I wasn't sure I was going to go there today. So, but talk to me about that.
I recently spoke to somebody, I can't say who it is, that donated some stuff to the Smithsonian, some really precious artifacts that was contacted recently by the Smithsonian to say they wanted to send them back to him. The Smithsonian, the President of the United States cannot fire the head of the Smithsonian. He can't. He doesn't have, that's not the way the Smithsonian works.
But he's trying to stack the board.
The board can fire him. And on the board is the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, the Vice President of the United States, by default. That's the way the board, the Smithsonian goes back to like 1843. And when it was created with this structure. There's 17 board members. The Vice President of the United States is automatically on the board, but almost never has ever gone to any of the meetings. No Vice President normally shows up. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court is automatically on. And then the rest of the board is created by an equal number of Democrats and Republicans that the House, the Speaker of the House gets to appoint, and the head of the Senate. Those are both Republicans right now. So they get to appoint most of the board. So the board is majority Republican. If that board decides to fire the current secretary, Ralph Bunche, who created, he was behind creating the Smithsonian, they could fire him. But they also are probably going to start tailoring the way the Smithsonian does its exhibits. And I've been to exhibits where this happens, where you go through and you see an enslaved woman behind the glass. And then you ask, well, what was her story? And then the person really can't tell you because it violates their anti-DEI policy to say this woman was raped and abused, she was harmed. You have to, what the right wants is a version of the slavery story in which there are happy slaves in the field singing and dancing, where they get Sundays off and free scrapple every night to eat, and that they wasn't so bad, and that slavery was everywhere anyway, and that we have to make, because they don't want the historical white people to be seen as villains. But my whole thing is, if you're a white person, and there's a villainous white person from like 400 years ago, and it bothers you that 400-year-ago white person is a villain. But there are also other white people in that history that were like abolitionists. And you're real worried about the villain one. That's because you relate to the villain one.
Wow.
So all that tells me is that of all the white people in history, you don't relate to the abolitionist ones because you're not thinking about them. You're not thinking, well, maybe if I look at the full history of the United States, I could identify with those white people. You identify with that bad white person, the mean one, the bad one. And so you want to erase that person because in that sense, that person is you. Wow. Right? Wow. In your mind, that's what you're telling me. So I think the biggest history now is that the people in charge of the country now, because of Project 2025, which we try to warn people about, try to tell y'all, they're implementing that. Yeah. And because this time Trump is, he's not just coming in with his own free thoughts, which are bizarre. He's got a playbook, and all he has to do is allow the people he works for to just run the playbook. And the playbook includes erasing the history of all but white Christian men from the country. I think the second big thing to worry about is just what this building is. Nonprofits are about to be attacked in a way that you've never seen before. If you're a nonprofit that in any way helps people of color, black people, gay people, if you've got black in your name, as we just heard Reverend Sheffield say, if the indications on your, the Soros Foundation is probably cooked. Like if you are in the business of helping indigenous people, anything, but we give money to Christian white people, you're in danger of losing your tax free status. They're threatening churches with losing their tax-free status. They're trying to undermine universities. They want to take control of universities so that they teach this warped version of history they want. They're trying to control the entire culture because the culture is so progressive and so open and so, it's become so multicultural. They understand the only way to reverse it is by force.
Oh, man. I need a minute. Let me ask you this. What gives you hope? There's a lot happening right now, but is there anything that makes you optimistic, that gives you hope? What should we, give me something to walk out of here feeling good about.
Well, we about to have a dope mayor in Detroit, how about that?
Dope mayor, right.
And that does give me hope because we still have people standing for office and believing in in their ability to make change. And look, the Target boycott gives me a lot of hope. The Target boycott to me speaks to a modern iteration of a willingness to protest in small ways. I just did this Medgar and Murley book, and one of the things Medgar Evers would say is not everyone has the wherewithal or even necessarily the courage to protest. Marching is dangerous, especially now that the Insurrection Act is on the table. You can get killed marching. You can get hurt marching. You can get arrested. Not everybody has the wherewithal to do that. Some people have a mortgage to pay. They have bills to pay. And even back then, people had stuff to do. But Medgar Evers launched a boycott against the stores in Jackson, Mississippi, coming into Easter, this time period. Because what happened is in Jackson stores, black women couldn't try on clothes, black people couldn't try on shoes. You had to just buy, and good luck, you couldn't return anything. You, in some cases, couldn't come in through the front door. And when you went in, no one would call you Mr. or Mrs. They would call you by your first name, or they would call you girl. They would call you you. They were so disrespectful. But it was the only place to buy your Easter hat, your Easter bonnet, your Easter clothes. So what Medgar said is, you may not be a protester. Maybe your kids are the ones who want to protest. But what you can do, you can make your clothes this season. You can wear the dress you wore last year. You can trade maybe with some friends. Maybe you internally form a little group and you all find clothes and work together, form a little seamstress club. Do something that isn't even visible, but that gives you your dignity.
Wow.
And to me, the Target boycott is us in this era reproducing that, and the Montgomery bus boycott, demand for dignity. Because I was a Target girl. I'm writing my Substack on this now. I was a Target girl, honey. I was in Target buying all the things and the beauty supplies. I'll be in there for 4 hours and spend $400. Didn't even mean to. Love Target. Target, okay?
Right.
Target, because it was like a little bit better quality. You know, it was nicer than Walmart. It was not evil like Walmart, but you could still get your things, right? I love Target. But look, you can have a really great relationship, right, with somebody, and they're handsome, they're good looking, or they're beautiful, and you're like, ooh, but then they treat you like crap.
Yeah.
And you guys start asking yourself, is this relationship worth it? Because they don't really respect me. Oh my gosh, I don't respect myself when I'm with them. We've all dated somebody like that, right? We've had a relationship where it's like the person is fine, but they don't respect you.
Right.
And at a certain point, you have to say, you know what? It's not worth it.
Yeah.
I love your beauty aisle. Mm-hmm. I enjoy your, home products from HGTV.
But you love yourself.
But I love myself more than I love you.
Yeah.
And what we've said to Target is that you're a giant Harvard endowment-sized corporation. Mm-hmm. I went to Harvard. Harvard is not liberal.
Right.
I took Ec 10 there. All they teach you is neoliberal economics, and they teach you that equity is the opposite, is the enemy of capitalism. Okay, that's what I took Ec 10. It is not liberal. Harvard is not liberal. But Harvard, with its $53 billion endowment, told the administration, you can't control us.
Wow. Yeah.
Target is rich like them. In
Yeah.
fact, richer than them.
Richer.
So you're telling me that Target, that had the cojones to step out for George Floyd, because you're based in Minneapolis, that had the wherewithal to say, we're going to give $2 billion. Okay, Harvard never promised anybody $2 billion. Y'all did. After George Floyd, you said you were going to give Black America $2 billion worth of investment in Black businesses.
Right.
You made all these promises. You are the title sponsor of Essence Fest. Did y'all know that?
Yes.
If you go to Essence Fest, you're going to shop at Target, whether you like it or not.
And the ELC.
Yes. Hello. Target is all over Essence Fest. But yet, when the administration says DEI is bad, you jump on their bandwagon. And on the bandwagon of racists who hate DEI because they think it means Black. They don't know it means disabled and veterans and all sorts of other people, and white women get the most of it. They didn't know that. They heard Black. When they hear DEI, they hear Black, 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 Black. You jumped on a racist bandwagon, Target. We are in a bad relationship. We're in a toxic relationship, and you can't have my money.
Wow. Yeah.
And I promise you, I know they supposedly done talk to Reverend Sharpton, and they talk to whoever, and they're having all sort of side meetings with their various civil rights organizations. That's not the way to get us back in a relationship.
No.
Until you do right by me, Target, and my people, nothing you do gonna come to good. We need an apology.
Yeah.
We need you to stand on business and say, we're bringing back DEI, we're sorry, and DEI is coming back. We're going to restore everything and do everything we said, and we need accountability and verify. We need to verify, trust but verify, because we don't trust you. Mm-hmm. Spend the money first and then come talk to us. Do the $2 billion, put it in the bank. When everybody gets their money and it clears.
And we'll talk to you.
And all of the employees who you made them skip their bonuses and you claimed it was tariffs, but we know it was us. Stop lying about why your foot traffic is down. We know it's us. Tell the truth. Say you're sorry. Spend the $2 billion. Put the money in the Black banks, like you said. Do all of the things that Target, right? They commit to all of it. Do it. Apologize, and then come back and talk to us, and we'll see if we'll go back in the aisles. But until then, no, sir, no, ma'am.
That's what's up. Wow. So I know that your schedule is very full, and I know you got some places to be. I am going to ask you one last question.
Yes.
And that is, what current projects are you working on? Where can we expect to see you next? What's next for Joy Reid?
Well, well, first of all, again, you can find me at joyannereid.com, which is where I tell everybody what I'm doing. You can keep up with me. I write every day. I do a daily read, and I sort of get things on there. I do a lot of lives with other people on Substack, loving Substack. But I am about to embark on, with a bunch of other great people, the State of the People Power Tour, which is one of the places it is coming to Detroit.
And what up, though?
The State of the People Power Tour. And if you remember State of the People, we did a live 24-hour stream on the night of the State of the Union. And more than 1 million people tuned in. So we know people want this information. We know folks are ready to be empowered. I know there's the picture of the black woman sitting on the building, drinking, sipping. Baby, the building is on fire. So we have decided to come off the building and try to save our communities and make sure that we're protected from all the horrors. Because let me tell you, go back and read the 1930s. It's not good. It doesn't end well. So we have to understand that we're in this fight. And you know what I always say to people is that if somebody is making war on you, you are at war whether you want to be or not. And war is being made on our communities, on our friends, and I mean our friends. I know a lot of people are angry at the Arab American and Muslim American community, which voted the other way or didn't vote, even including here in Dearborn. I know people are angry at Latinos for Trump. I know people are angry at folks that, white Americans that voted for Trump. I get it. But at this point, we all on the same Titanic. And that thing gonna sink whether you mad at them Latinos and mad at them Arab and Muslims or not. We gonna sink with them. And so the reality is if we don't save Mr. Abrego Garcia, if Kilmar Abrego Garcia goes, we all go. Because but for the grace of God, we are next. And so the reality is we gotta put it aside. We don't have to forgive Target. We don't even have to forgive Latinos for Trump. We don't have to forgive Dearborn. But we have to save this country's democracy for ourselves, regardless of how we feel about those individual people. So I'm doing the tour, and then I have another thing that I'm going to be announcing very soon. If you go on joyannereid.com, you'll see it. But I have something really exciting. But in the meantime, you can listen to me on Read This, Read That, which is my fun podcast with Jackie Reid, which is every week. But yeah, I got more stuff coming. Lots of big things.
Love it. Let's give it up for Joy Reid, y'all.